Welcome to Freedom, Facts, and Firearms. My name is Novak, and I'll be taking you through the history and the law of the Second Amendment, what inspired it, what it's meant to be, and how it's supposed to be. This is your chance to be armed with the knowledge to fight back against the lies, the media, the politicians, and the courts. Here in Part 1, we're looking at the English history and influence on the Second Amendment. Let's get into it. The starting point for our firearm laws came from King Alfred's reign during the Anglo-Saxon period in England starting in the year 871. King Alfred gathered and led the English to push out their Danish oppressors, and quickly recognizing that another Danish invasion was inevitable, he initiated the principle of collective self-defense. Collective self-defense was the principle that all free men should be armed, trained, and ready to fight to defend their local and national communities. King Alfred improved the English militia, which consisted of all able-bodied men, and all men 16 to 60 must bear arms to defend the country. This is the basis for the militia and the Second Amendment that are to be created over 900 years later in America. Alfred organized the militias by shires. Further, the militias of each shire were split into two groups, neither to serve at the same time to reduce the impact it had on the economy. King Alfred also created the position of sheriff. The sheriff was generally the leader of the county militia and exercises the authority to summon and command the armed people. The people themselves, and under the guidance of the sheriff, would maintain law and order in their own communities. Thomas Jefferson would go on to write on July 12, 1816, that the office of sheriff was the most important of all the executive officers of the county, so pay close attention to that position in your next election. King Alfred would be revered by the English and later the Americans for bringing peace and security to England, as well as his firm belief in freedom. Americans would come to idealize Anglo-Saxon England as a land of law and liberty. Under Anglo-Saxon rule, animals were considered to belong to no one and anyone was allowed to hunt. Upon the fall of the Anglo-Saxon rule in 1066 by King William I, known as William the Conqueror, he claimed all animals as belonging to the king, and no one shall be able to hunt them without his permission, even upon one's own land. This was the start of arms restrictions in England. Later, in 1181, King Henry II promoted the Statute of Assize. It ordered Jews to surrender coats of mail and breastplates, but required Christian free men to acquire arms appropriate to their social rank. The higher the rank, the more extensive and expensive the required arms. Subjects must have the exact quantities of particular arms, no more and no less. In 1285, King Edward I amended the Statute of Assize and turned it into the Statute of Winchester. The changes included widening arms ownership to all free men, but maintained those in the higher social ranks were to have more and more expensive arms, and it also set a minimum requirement for arms possession, so people of financial ability could hold as many arms as they could afford. Large landowners often had very large private arsenals. The Statute of Winchester read, "It is likewise commanded that every man have in his house arms for keeping the peace in accordance with the ancient assize, namely, that every man between 15 and 60 be assessed and sworn to arms according to the amount of his lands and of his chattels, that is to say, for 15 pounds of land and 40 marks worth of chattels, a hauberk, a helmet of iron, a sword, a knife, and a horse. For 10 pounds worth of land and over, up to 100 shillings worth of chattels, a habergeon, a helmet, a sword, and a knife. For 100 shillings worth of land, a doublet, a helmet of iron, a sword, and a knife. For 40 shillings worth of land and over, up to 100 shillings worth, a sword, a bow, arrows, and a knife. And he who has less than 40 shillings worth of land shall be sworn to keep gisarms, knives, and other small weapons. He who has less than 20 marks in chattels, swords, knives, and other small weapons. And all others who can do so shall have bows and arrows outside the forests, and within them bows and bolts. And that the view of arms be made twice a year, and in each hundred and liberty let 2 constables be chosen to make the view of arms, and the aforesaid constables shall, When the justices assigned to this come to the district, present before them the defaults they have found in arms, in watchkeeping, and in highways, and present also people who harbor strangers in upland bills for whom they are not willing to answer. And the justices assigned shall present again to the king in each parliament, and the king will provide a remedy therefor. And from henceforth let sheriffs and bailiffs, whether bailiffs of liberties or not, whether of greater or less authority, who have a bailiwick or forester's office, in fee or otherwise, take good care to follow the cry with the district, and according to their degree keep horses and arms to do this with. And if there is any who does not do it, let the defaults be presented by the constables to the justices assigned, and then afterwards by them to the kind as aforesaid. Under English law prior to the Norman Conquest of 1066, all able-bodied men between 16 and 60 were obliged to pursue fleeing criminals and were allowed to use deadly force, if necessary, to prevent escape. The hue and cry, as it was known, was the victim of a crime reporting said crime and causing the sheriff and local militia to take action. Shires were further divided into small units called wapentake. If a victim invoked the hue and cry and the wapentake did not apprehend the criminal within a certain number of days, the victim could sue the wapentake for compensation. Prior to the reign of King Alfred, and still in use today in America, posse comitatus was used to enforce laws and provide security to communities. The sheriff had this power to summon the posse to assist him. Unlike militias, the posse consisted of every able-bodied man, no upper age limits, and few to no exemptions from service. Members would use their own arms, but the sheriff could determine what arms could be used for the task at hand. Posse duties ranged from serving writs to suppressing riots or hunting fugitives. Today, about one-third of Colorado's sheriffs still use posses, although most are now specially trained volunteers. It was in 1215 the Magna Carta was made to rein in the powers of the king and protect the people. A few lines in particular, while they do not specifically mention arms, imply their use against the monarchy. Magna Carta, Article 61. And if we shall not have corrected the transgression, or in the event of our being out of the realm, if our justiciar shall not have corrected it, within 40 days, reckoning from the time it has been intimated to us, or to our justiciar, if we should be out of the realm, the 4 barons aforesaid shall refer that matter to the rest of the 25 barons, and those 25 barons shall, together with the community of the whole land, distrain and distress us in all possible ways, namely by seizing our castles, lands, possessions, and in any other way they can, until redress has been obtained as they deem fit, saving harmless our own person and the persons of our queen and children. And when redress has been obtained, they shall resume their old relations toward us. This meant that if an issue arose and that issue went unaddressed for the specified time period, the people were legally allowed to seize the king's assets by force until the issue was resolved. Imagine what our country would be like today if we were allowed to seize the government's assets by force until they resolved our issues. The English were not the only ones who faced tyrannical pressures. It was in 1222 the Hungarian people forced their King Andrew II to enact the Golden Bull as a measure against tyranny, which stated, "We also ordain that if we or any of our successors shall at any time contravene the terms of this statute, the bishops and the higher and lower nobles of our realm, one and all, both present and future, shall by virtue thereof have the uncontrolled right in perpetuity of resistance, both by word and deed, without thereby incurring any charge of treason." So once again, people were given the right of armed resistance to a tyrannical ruler. This just goes to show you that people in multiple countries opposed oppression and held the right to arms for their defense against oppression high. We're going to wrap it up there for today. I'll do my best to hit the key points and keep these videos short. Make sure to share the video so we can keep gun owners and others informed of our history. Spread the word and stay informed. In the next episode, we'll be going into castle doctrine, self defense, and the right to carry.